Hello, welcome to the ideaofaman.com podcast number 6, I believe we're up to. I'm so glad you're here joining me once again for another one of these amazing podcasts. I've certainly found them amazing and I hope that you're enjoying them too. We have got 12 kind of to get through to lay down the foundations of explaining on these podcasts the 12 chambers of the idea of a man. Also, we're going to be having some exciting guests coming up soon on the Idea of a Man podcast, so do stay tuned. But in the meantime, I hope that you're enjoying this foundation that we're laying, because we're talking about some really important and interesting topics, and we're laying a foundation or explaining really what the idea of a man is all about. So that kind of gives us a foundation, so some good content as well for the website, so that when you do land upon the Idea of a Man website, you can know exactly what we're all about, where we're at, what we're doing, and align yourself with this. Get involved, or use this material to help you on your journey, which is what it's really all about. Today we're going to be talking about finances, and I'll explain where that kind of falls in the sort of journey of the idea of a man and the 12 chambers in a couple of moments. So yeah, do leave comments, do hit me up and make me aware of how and if this is impacting you in a meaningful way. I'll certainly be encouraged by that, and certainly like to know how it's helping you in any meaningful manner. So let's first of all look at it. So basically what we've been doing here at the Idea of a Man, we've got 4 quarters, essentially, just like any sort of 12-step process, like the 12 months of a year. You've got your 4 quarters. The first quarter, we did the self-discovery piece, which is so important here at the Idea of a Man, because it's all about you ascertaining for yourself what your idea of a man is. That's the foundation. The idea of a man is not a concept where we're trying to get you to subscribe to our idea of a man. We don't need you to do that in any way, shape, or form. However, what I'm encouraging you to do is to discover for yourself and embrace for yourself what your idea of a man is. Ask that question for yourself and ascertain, what does this whole masculinity journey, this reality of being male, mean to me? Forget everybody else's idea, forget everybody else's notions. The more you can peel back the onion to get to the authenticity of your fundamental core truth, without allowing kind of other ideas to seep in. Of course they're gonna seep in to an extent, but the more you can strip it back and really interrogate yourself for what resonates wholesomely with you, what makes you feel that lines up, that's accurate, that makes sense to me, to my body, to my mind, to my emotional constitution. And oftentimes in that journey we might find areas of pain. We might find the things that we are stuck in, or the things that kind of have been a problem to us in different stages of our life. And a big part of that is where we might need to do some shadow work. And a lot of what we do here at the Idea of a Man is to discuss how doing what we call shadow work can help. Shadow work really is just looking at the areas of our life that, particularly as children, as younger people, we put aspects of ourselves into shadow because we are trying to survive out here in the world, and we oftentimes contort ourselves into what it feels like is required by the external pressures of people who are older and wiser than us, allegedly, and we become what we need to become to survive. But then later in life, you may find that your behaviors and the way in which you live your life doesn't necessarily work or make sense or add up, or perhaps there's limitations and there's things that you're not able to fulfill, which potentially you could fulfill if, or at least you have a desire within you to fulfill more, to be more, to step beyond the parameters of your truth, of your normal, of your day-to-day existence. And it's that kind of grating within yourself as you experience life, that sort of that uncomfortability with how things are, that begins to cause us to ask deeper questions and to look for solutions. And in that process, if we look deep enough, if we look within, we see that sometimes the issues or the obstacles are not actually external. It's the way we're interacting with the external obstacles that are apparent to us. It's the way we're seeing life and the way that we're engaging with life. And so therefore, sometimes things need to heal within us so that we can engage with life on a different plateau. So here at the Idea of a Man, the first quarter is all about asking the question, who am I? Then geographically locating yourself on the landscape that you wish to exist within, so that you can build a life for you that has meaning to you. So the second question is, where do I fit? And then the third question is, how do we go from survival mode into thrival mode? And that's the first 3 things that we talked about in the podcast that we've done here at the Idea of a Man. Next, we're going through business, finances, and the last of this quarter will be recreation, which we have yet to do. So I guess we're up to number 5 because recreation action would be number 6. So I did lie earlier when I said that we are up to number 6. We're up to number 5. Today we're going to be talking about finances, and it follows on from the conversation we had about business. And the reason why we're talking about business here at The Idea of a Man is because once we've done that self-discovery, once we've understood the geography of where we want to locate our lives and place ourselves in the types of relationships, the type of career, the type of perhaps even country, physical geographic location we want to sort of put ourselves into in life, our life might need some funding, might need some, we might need to patronize our mission on this earth, our idea of a man, so we can live out that truth. We might need to have some invest in ourselves. And so therefore, discussing business is really so that we can comport ourselves into the marketplace and utilize our unique gifts, the things that are intrinsic to who we are, and not detract from that, but actually living out the fullness of who we are, stepping into the marketplace in a way that's holistic to us, in a way that is genuine from the core of our beings, and is able to bring deep fulfillment to our souls. Because so often we find ourselves as men living lives where we're just handling our business, handling our responsibilities, and that's all well and good, but that can lead to a lot of different things. Sometimes it turns into internal burnout, and sometimes it's a very external explosion where we kind of, perhaps sometimes at midlife, men kind of just go off the rails and live, a life that's, not lined up with anything that's responsible. Sometimes different stages of life can be so frustrating because there's things inside of us that want expression, and we don't know how to give them expression because we've never given ourselves the permission. We haven't asked and answered the right questions. We haven't done the quote unquote what we call the work to really come to terms with our truth as a man and to understand why we're here, what it is that we're here to offer. And so that's why the idea of a man is doing important work with us as men to help us to ask and answer those questions, get to the bottom of those things. But then once we've done that, how we're going to make this practical and real, because we don't want to just philosophize about this. We want to actually do the work to lay foundations to make this thing real for us so we can actually transform our lives, we can actually change. So do go back, if you haven't listened to the podcast that we did about business, have a listen to that, because I think we covered some really good territory. Also in that, we're laying a foundation for the types of things we're going to be talking about here at The Idea of a Man, which again is very practical wherever you are. We looked at the 4 quadrants that Robert Kiyosaki talks about in his book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Not that we're kind of doing much with regards to necessarily his work, although we may draw some inspiration from lots of different sources, but the quadrants gives us a bit of a flavor for where we find ourselves. Are we in employment? Are we unemployed even? Are we self-employed? Are we an employer? Are we running a business ourselves, or are we beyond that stage and in the place of investment? Whatever stage you find yourself on, have you already asked and answered the question of who am I and where do I fit? Because if, say, for example, you'd gone through all the quadrants, you're that guy, you've got that money in your bank account, in your wallet, you've succeeded, as it were, by the metrics by which oftentimes as human beings we measure each other on this planet, but you haven't done the self-discovery work to know really what your thing is. Perhaps you came into wealth, perhaps you worked your arse off in whatever seemed right at the time and it worked out for you. It doesn't work out for all of us, but you haven't done that intrinsic work. Maybe there could be a longing, a sense of unfulfillment, something that still needs to be done within your life to get things on track to where it really needs to be so you can be in flow. That's just one possibility. Perhaps the other possibility is that you are like perhaps many of us, perhaps there's going to be more of a plethora of us who find ourselves in employment, working the 9 to 5, working for the man, and there's a level of unfulfillment in the work that we do because we find ourselves just being a cog in somebody else's wheel, and there's not enough time or hours in the day for us to express sometimes the actual longings of our souls, the deeper things that want to gain expression through us, the actual reason why we're on this planet. And we talk about things like the dead-end job and how that can feel to us as a man, and how it can feel so frustrating to be in that place and not able to live a life for us that really has meaning to us. So how do we go from that place? How do we leverage the wages that we earn now, the way in which we spend our time and our energy at this precise moment, so we can develop ourselves and cultivate ourselves and use our money to grow to the next stage? These are the kind of practical things we talked about as we discussed business. And I want to take that concept a little bit further today and get into the idea of finance specifically. There's a couple of things that we should be looking at here in the area of finance, and obviously the area of how we gain finance or bring that into our lives through business and through our enterprise is going to be very, very important. But the other thing we need to look at again is also our mindset toward the area of finance. So to look at that, and I may have talked about this in our podcast on business, but I think it's deeply relevant to the concept that we're going to talk about today of finance. I want to throw out the concept of spend, the things we spend. The things we spend. So the things we spend are time, energy, and money. And I'm going to steal from my beautiful wife a acronym that she uses beautifully, which is the word systems. And the word I just kind of had some wind there as I said that. So I don't know if you hear the word I said systems, which stands for simply save yourself some time, energy, and money. Save yourself some time, energy, and money. Systems. Now, it's such a powerful concept because those are the things that we spend. We spend time, we spend energy, and we spend money. And when we are not doing that with intention, which is, again, what the idea of a man is all about, as we get that deeper understanding of who we are, where we fit, and how we're going to go from survival mode into thrival mode, one of the big keys to that is to live more intentionally, to have more specific kind of intention with regards to the choices we're making, how we're living, and how we're conducting our affairs. So therefore, in this area of the things that we spend, our time and energy and our money, we have to begin to realize that we can do that intentionally, and that transforms our lives, because basically that's almost the fabric of your life. The time that you spend doing whatever it is that you do, the energy that you exert into everyday life, and then really kind of the currency, the things that you use those resources on. So oftentimes we have lots of different ideas around money. Sometimes money, like when it comes to you and it's in your pocket, it's kind of like it's burning a hole in your pocket, and you just kind of get through it real quickly, and you're back to zero, because your natural kind of way of being is always to have zero in your pocket. So if you have a lump of money, all of a sudden it kind of runs away from you because you're not living intentionally, and because that money or your relationship with money is perhaps not fully integrated, not fully thought about, never really been addressed in your life, and perhaps there's some archaic baggage that you might be carrying from childhood or from some previous incarnation of yourself as you've gone through your life's journey that perhaps could be addressed. It might be a whole familial perspective on money. You know, so many of us carry stuff because, say, we were brought up in a family where we were told that money doesn't grow on trees, and and with a certain sense of lack and limitation, and all those kind of factors that all the self-help people will kind of talk to us about. And sure, here at the Idea of a Man, we're going to draw from that type of thinking. The fact that we can change our thinking and change our life, and we can grow beyond and all that, that's exciting. But we want to make it as practical as possible, so that actually we do change as men specifically, and that we're not getting any fluffy stuff. We're not getting anything airy-fairy. We're actually able to grow and to expand, but most of all, expand and grow in the ways that really align with a vision, with a dream that we're building for ourselves. Okay, and that can be sometimes hard to even, to even have the faith to believe that I could put together a dream and I could make it happen. So to break it down and make that part simple is simply to get that pen and paper out and put on there, first of all, to make it visual, an A on one side and a B on the other side, and a line through the middle. And then begin to meditate and take your time to think about the A. And the A is your current location, where you currently find yourself. The B is your planned or desired destination, where you want to be. And the space in between is how you're going to get from A to B. Now, this is where the intention bit comes into play, because oftentimes we think, oh, my life is crap, I wish things could be different, but we've never really done the work to sit down and simply do a simple exercise like that, where we've actually thought about what is it actually ultimately that I would like to have in my life, and then to ask ourselves and answer the questions, what would it take to have those things in my life and make my life look like that? Then we might bump into the reality that we don't feel worthy of the life we want to live. And that's where the work begins. That's where you have to start asking and answering questions. Why do I feel unworthy? Is there guilt in my life? Is there shame in my life? Is there something in my life that I need to address? Is there somebody I need to apologize to? Is there somebody I need to be more honest with? Is there some area of my life which I'm carrying some baggage because I haven't dealt correctly with it? Or is it simply the fact that I've felt this way all my life because, in fact, I know intrinsically I'm being disingenuous to myself, and in fact the life that I want to live and the person that I am doesn't reflect or even compare to the way I'm living, because I don't feel I have permission from, say, your parents, from society, from whatever it is around you, to be the kind of man you actually want to be. Perhaps in the company of other men, you feel you have to show up a particular way because that's how men carry on, that's how men behave, that's what's acceptable in the brotherhood of men on earth. But in fact, if you were to really begin to what's the word?
Interrogate.
Interrogate yourself with regards to what it is you want to be as a man, you were able to discover a completely different version of man that actually wanted to express himself through you. Now, if that was the case, and you're not living genuine to that, you may feel that there's a huge blockage and something that prevents you from even being able to live your dreams, being able to pursue your desired destination, your point B, on that piece of paper. So all these things are going to need to be addressed, and the idea of a man is here to help us address those things, to get on the real with it, to get true to ourselves. Because if we don't, be honest with ourselves first, how are we ever going to be honest with others? And so before we even start the process of beginning to be honest and more integral with those around us, let's start to develop some integrity with ourselves and be honest with ourselves. Who are we? What do we want? Where do I want to comport myself and live my existence? And how do I make my life a thrival life as opposed to just a survival, mechanism, just an ebb and flow of life and wondering where it all went and what did I spend my time and energy and money doing? So again, after we've done the exercise, we've looked at point B, we begin to audit what resources do I have at my disposal right now? What level of money could I potentially save to begin to build something that could transform and change things? Now, when you start on the game of saving in life, it's so difficult and so easy to, to save, then to dip into your savings, then to lose all your savings, and to not ever really get into the habit of it. So we have to find ways of developing, cultivating the habits of being able to do these things. And again, a few things I think are going to really help. And first of all, with this whole intentional aspect of way of living, we're doing this for ourselves. And I think that one of the most powerful motivations, certainly for myself, has been when I have stopped looking at myself for a motivation. As men, sometimes we feel obliged. We have to do these things for our wives, for our children. We have to do these things for society. We have to do these things to be able to hold our head up with a sense of pride in this world. But what about that deep inside of you? What is it that you really want? Now, I'm not saying that being a respectable guy with some level of social acumen and everything else is an issue. That's all well and good, particularly if it's coming from your authentic self. It becomes an issue, though, if the person that you are being in order to kind of gain your social credits is in fact no reflection of who you actually are, because that's going to lead to you trying to live some double life. And long term, that's going to cause you more mental, emotional torment and stress and pressure and issues that really you need to give yourself. And additionally, it often lands a lot of hurt and pain to some people who are most close to you, who see and perceive you in a particular way, but in fact, that's got nothing to do with your truth and reality. An integral person who knows who they are and lives from that space, who gives themselves the permission to live their truth, spares themselves all of that kind of madness and mess and mayhem. So I would encourage you to do that work for yourself so that the life that you're living, the life you're building, is able to expend your energy, again, that energy that we spend in more worthwhile and worthy pursuits, in the pursuit of actually living a fulfilled life, living a meaningful life. Sometimes the idea of living a fulfilled and meaningful, happy and peaceful life seems so beyond the pale. It's like, it really is. That's fantasy stuff. No, it's not. It's simply intentional. It's simply saying, you know what, I'm worthy, I'm deserving, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to live this way as opposed to that way. I did a beautiful exercise once with the Mankind Project where we were doing like kind of a retreat, and we had two men standing behind us as we stood in the center of the room. And to the man on the one hand side, we had to tell them all the things, the negative self-talk that goes through our head, the kind of words we hear on a regular basis when we are inclined to step out and step beyond our boundaries and do the things we need to do. And so we got this guy to kind of have like 4 or 5 specific statements, and he was going to repeat them over and over again to us from behind. The other guy, though, was going to be genned up with all the things, the positive dreams, hopes, aspirations, and things we want to achieve and get on with and make happen in our lives. And that was going to be another voice. And what was going to happen was, as we stood in that center with these two men behind us, speaking these things, we had two roads before us. We had the crossroads. And the choice we have in our lives, which we actually have every single day of our lives, was to consider, if I listen to the negative voice behind me, a year from now, where will I be? If I listen to that voice and continue on the track that's going to lead me, 2 years from now, where's my life going to be? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20, 30, on my deathbed, where will my life go if I continue to listen to that voice, that naysaying voice, that voice of destructive naysaying, I'm not good enough, etc., etc., etc. Where's my life going to be by the end of this game? However, on the other hand, the alternative option, the alternative road, is if I silence that voice, tell that motherfucker to fuck off, and listen to this voice and say, you know what? Actually, I'm going to step out the boat. I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to start making some key decisions and choices about what I want in my life. And I'm going to push through some obstacles and keep hammering forward just for a year. Where would I be in a year's time? If I did it for 2 years, what's possible for me in 2 years' time? 5, 10, 20, by the end of my life? How am I going to look back on my life and think, damn, my whole existence is a whole different ballgame? So here at the Idea of a Man, we want you to be able to live by listening to that positive voice in your life, by silencing the negative that's come through from childhood, come through from society, come through from your internal lack of self-confidence, your fears, your anxieties, your doubts, the failures you've had in your life up to this point, etc., and so on and so forth. You can't fail at being yourself if you just make that your only mission, to just be you, to just use the gifts that are intrinsic and unique to you, and begin to develop a love for you, because you're precious to you, because you're the only you on this game of life, in this journey that is yours. This life that you're living is uniquely yours. Only you are living the experience that you're having, and only you can impact the people around you in the way that you can. And perhaps the impact you've been having up to this point has not been positive, but that can change when you start having a positive impact initially upon your own life. And so first of all, we start by addressing those areas within ourselves, so we can address the area of how we spend our energy, because all this negative self-talk and negative posturing of our lives affects the way we spend our energy, and then it affects the way we spend our time, and then it has a huge knock-on impact on the way we spend our money. So when we have a mission, or we have a vision in our mind, we've set a point B of our desired destination, then we all of a sudden have somewhere to go, a vision and a plan we can begin to put into place, so we can audit our current resources. How much money do I have at the end of the month that I could perhaps put aside to begin to build towards that bigger goal? We talked in our business conversation about in the four quadrants. If you're, say, in the initial quadrant of in employment, you can start to take, and we took this from the book, The Richest Man of Babylon, your 10%, you begin to pay yourself 10% of your wages first. 10% of all you earn is yours to keep. You put that aside and you say, I'm not going to spend that on anything. I'm going to take that aside and I'm going to invest that into my future. I'm going to begin to make sure that begins to become my nest egg. That's going to be invested in something that's going to bring a return on my investment. I'm going to invest that into an appreciable asset as opposed to a depreciating liability. So much of our time, energy, and money is spent on depreciating liabilities, on things that, we're left with just dust and ashes. There's nothing that we can look back on and say, I used my time, my energy, my money, and this is a return that I got on the investment of my time and energy and money. And all those things are things that we're investing. We're always investing our time and energy and our money in various different things. And so what we invest our time and energy and money in will eventually either come back to us or not, or just be lost to time and space. And so therefore being intentional with regards to how we're spending these things is going to be transformative in the way we live our life. It's going to be really helpful and enable us to be able to live a life that perhaps we can't even yet envision or perhaps perceive is possible for us. But think about it this way. We're going to start listening to that voice, the voice of positivity from within us, the voice that says what's possible, and we're going to consider as we go down the road what becomes possible a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, as we start to listen more and more and more to that voice, we're able to change up the game as we start to change up the way we think, the way we pursue our destiny, and the way we get intentional and specific about how we're going to do this. So point A, where am I now? We do some audit, we do some work on establishing where that is. We look at the point B and we begin to think about and we plot along the line, what are the specific things that I'm likely to encounter? What pitfalls will I encounter? What relationships am I going to have to address? What conversations do I need to have? What career decisions do I need to make? What courses do I need to take? What things do I need to stop doing in my life? What things do I need to start doing in my life? What habits do I need to begin to cultivate? And again, when we do this work, we're not expecting everything to just change overnight or to just change instantly, because very, very few people on this earth ever get to just change instantly and become Superman overnight. You have to work at your craft and you have to develop mastery. One of the things that we're going to be doing here at the Idea Man is some very interesting courses, and one of them is around a specific thing which is called From Philosopher to Initiate to Master, and we're going to develop ourselves from the talking stage where we discuss these matters from a philosophical angle to initiating ourselves into the process of developing ourselves further, and then learning how to master our individual crafts so we can become the best versions of us we can be. And so this is what we're talking about here, is that point B is your point of mastery. It's that point where you are now living a life for you that has meaning to you. This is the life of your dreams, and at that point you can set yourself further goals. Then you've got also a track record you can look back on of success, of your capacity within you to actually to set yourself a goal, to make hopes and dreams and aspirations, and to begin to pursue a route and begin to see things unfold for yourself that are transformative. So the area of finances, and the reason why we're talking about all these matters as it regards to finances, is because your money, your finance, is such a key area when it comes to how you spend that money, that dough, that energy that is money. And it's so important that you begin to put it into its rightful place within your life. It is one of those key components of it, like time, like energy. And we need to think about all of those, sometimes together, of how we investing our time and energy and money. How are we spending our time, energy, our money? Are we doing so in a way that is going to help us to get to our desired destination, live a life for us that has meaning to us, and be exciting, happy people who are loving our lives? Or are we just stuck in a place where we know we're just binge eating, we're just binge living, we're just living, wasting it all away? And if that's the case, why? What is it that's so compelling about living that self-destructive existence? Because the truth be told, as men, when we live self-destructively, we don't just do it alone. We tend to take others with us. We impact others around about us. The truth be told, at some point, even as a self-destructive man, you're going to want somebody to love you. And then when you go out there and you reach into another person's life, there's a terrible trend that was going on social media my wife told me about, whereby there was a lot of kind of before and after pictures of women who kind of showed how they were prior to kind of getting with a guy, and then how they ended up after having spent a period of time with this individual in their life. And my wife expressed her upset at what she saw, and how it was sad, and how the impact of these men upon these women's lives had taken these people down in like a very kind of visceral, physical, aesthetic way. You could look at their faces, you could look at their who they were. They'd put on weight. They were, they're not the image of the same human being that had started out before that man came into their life. And my question I'm asking myself, I hadn't actually seen those pictures myself, but just the question that I asked myself about that whole scenario is, is it because as men we are not doing this work where we begin to live with intention, live with purpose, live with a reason for ourselves, and we bring another person into our vortex, but only to then spend our time and energy and money in the destructive ways we are already doing, and not have any kind of vision either for ourselves or for anybody else, and therefore as a result we take others with us. So this work that we're doing is important to us, because we're very, very, very important to our lives, because it's us on the journey from the cradle to the grave, but also along the way we are going to impact others. And I'm the kind of person, when I've made mistakes in my life, when I've messed up other people's lives, when I've hurt other people, that stuff really, really fucks me up. Like I don't feel good about that whatsoever. That really, really messes me up. It hurts me on a way I can't even put into English. It's deep. And so I think that other men also think that way. I think for some of us as men, some of the suicides can be because we know we've hurt other people so badly by the way we've lived our lives. So I'm speaking from a perspective here at the idea of a man where to help save us all a bit from that terrible outcome, from the terrible outcomes of the possibilities of messing up our own lives and messing up the lives of others. I'm hoping to speak a word of hope into our lives around this area, specifically of finance. Because if we can spend with better intention, if we can invest with better intention, and by investment, yes, it will grow into that place where we are investors. We looked at the 4 quadrants in the business quarter. We went from employer to self-employed to employee, where you employee, to business owner, to employer, where you're employing others, to being an investor, where you now have money that you can get to work for you, not just people to work for you in your business, but in fact you have sufficient money to invest. But in fact, we can invest even when we don't have a lot of money. What you spend your money on is an investment. If you spend your money, say, for example, to begin to invest in your side hustle, if you spend some money to be able to begin to invest in a hobby that brings fulfillment and joy to your life and gives you access to expressing your truth in a more meaningful way on the earth and heals your mental and emotional well-being and brings you into deeper alignment with your truth, if you spend your time and energy and money on things that are healthy and hopeful and expand your consciousness, on a course, on reading a meaningful book, on doing something that's going to really be transformative to your life. I'm not saying that every single decision you make has to be kind of like deadly serious. I'm saying that we need to be perhaps a bit more intentional about the way in which we spend these key components of our life, our time, our energy, and our money. And we can transform our entire existence. The fun can then really begin. The fun and the joy of life starts not from sitting down just having another ice cream, but in fact looking at our lives like, damn, my life is badass because I'm doing shit that actually really makes sense to me. And now I'm opening and unfolding a life. I'm opening and unfolding the present that is the moment. Each moment doing the stuff that in fact gives me great joy, gives me great purpose, gives me great hope, gives me great intentionality. And every single kind of milestone that you're breaking through, every single time you accomplish one little piece more of the puzzle, you're going to be looking at your life thinking, you know what? This is starting to make sense. What's possible for me is actually unfolding. I'm starting to actually live an interesting and exciting and worthwhile life. Wow, what a joy! And if you like me, I certainly have had habits in my life that I've had to break. I've had times in my life where I haven't had a track record of success day in, day out. Some of us have been winners most of our lives, and we have a track record. We can look back on times of our lives where we've won over and over again, and that's a beautiful thing, because when you are trying to go to the next stage in your life, being able to have that track record to reflect on can give you a great deal of boost, a great deal of an awareness of what's possible for you. But if that hasn't been your portion, and as you look back, you have a track record of failing, stumbling, mucking around, then you might need to start building that. And that's just your first mission. Your first mission is to get a couple of successes under your belt. Do one little thing and just succeed at that. Then do 2, then do 5. And as that begins to multiply in your life, all of a sudden your track record, your self-confidence, your capacity to believe and know that you could do this stuff begins to transform your entire perspective, your paradigm, and your ability and capacity to do more. And why I'm saying all this is because I'm saying don't give up at the first hurdle. Don't give up at the first time you stumble and fall, because it's guaranteed you're likely to stumble and fall. That's the game of life. But this thing is deeper than your hurt feelings with regards to your stumble and fall. We all have hurt feelings. We're all working with that shit. It's not a biggie, really, in the grander scheme of things. The grand scheme of things is if we stay listening to that voice that says you are a failure, well, sure, but 1 year from now, that seed that's sowed into your thinking, into your perspective, into your conduct, into your life is going to bear fruit. And you're going to be looking at your life like, yeah, that's how it goes. But you have the capacity, the power to change it. But I'm not saying, look, get up, start living this amazing life right away. I'm saying one breath at a time, one step at a time, start changing things little by little, but from the perspective of that A4 piece of paper with the A on this side, the B on that side, the line through the middle, that shows you where you are currently and the B of your desired destination. Where is it you're going based upon having done the work to ascertain who you are and where you want to fit? What would just be an ideal life for you? What would make sense to you? What would make you happy? What would bring joy to your life? I mean, really, the world is your oyster. Everything is up for grabs. You can change so much about your life if you give yourself permission. You have to really begin to do the exploration and do it in private, do it with a pen and a paper and just begin to think. It's good to do it with a pen and paper because what you write down begins to take shape and take form. I remember, I've known this for a little while in various ways, but about a year or two ago, I wrote down a bunch of stuff that needed to change in my life, and I wrote it down and I put it away. And about a year later, I picked that up and I looked at it and I was like, damn, tick, 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 all the way through. There was just stuff that had not changed in my life for years, stuff that had been a frustration and an annoyance in me for years, but I hadn't wrote it down. But the year that I wrote it down, within a year, those things were done. They were dealt with in my life. I'm talking about like physical things that needed to happen to my house, that DIY projects that were really frustrating me, bugbears, things that I didn't have the money at the time to resolve, things that I didn't have the understanding to know how to sort out, but they were able to sort themselves out simply by the initial step of writing it down. There's some magic here, and some of the things we're going to talk about here at The Idea of a Man is going to be magical, not in the woohoo way, but in the sense that there are tools and there's things that we can do that in fact can transform the way we do everything we do. That in fact there's what's the word? Let's call it hacks. There's little hacks that we can tap into that can give us a way of getting from our A to our B in ways that we can't even imagine. We're like, oh damn, I made it. I got to the other side. I got through some stuff that looked really impossible to me a year ago, a couple of years ago. But in fact, as I started upon the journey and I started to give myself and commit myself to this work, things began to unfold. And another factor here, and this is my own personal belief of the way that I look at the world, you'll hear people say things like the universe is on my side. And, I really believe that the universe begins to conspire together when we get our mind on track with why we're here. Because if you think about it on a level, right, if you align yourself with your genuine truth, with what's really right for you, why would the universe not line up with that? Because if there is a reason why you're here, that reason isn't going to be entirely contrary and opposite to your fundamental wiring. In fact, it's more likely to be entirely in alignment with your fundamental wiring, with who you really are. Our problem is we allow all the voices and all the external stuff to kind of shape and form our perspectives on life and on the world. And so we allow external things to determine who we are, how we live our lives, and what we do. We talked in one of the earlier podcasts on, looking at the idea of identity, on, perhaps you need to rename yourself. A lot of people in the limelight of the world do that. We know them by this name, but in fact, when you look on their Wikipedia, they were known by this name when they were born and given a name by their parents. But that's actually quite a big step in your psychology when you say, okay, well, who actually am I? What do I want to name myself? And you take that level of authority over your own life, where you say, okay, I mean, we look back oftentimes on our upbringing, and there's regret, and there's we're not that pleased with our parents for this, that, or a third thing. Well, why do we trust them to be the person who lays that name upon you, that very important piece of information that people use every single day when they dialogue with you, or when you even think about yourself? How about you start from day one and you begin to rethink your whole life? You may not be in a place where you need to do that. Maybe your life is working for you, and that's wonderful. But perhaps as a man, you haven't yet done that work. And I know that there are a plethora of men out here. When we talk about things like toxic masculinity, when we look at the statistics of male suicide, male homicide, male incarceration, male drug addiction, male alcoholism, etc., all these different issues that seem to be sort of very high stacked against our lives, there's something going on which we need to address, and it only gets addressed when we address it. And I think that the first point is to literally line ourselves up with the universe by realizing that the universe is going to work with us a lot better when we get honest about who we are, what we're here to do. And then, believe me, the serendipities and the synchronicities of life begin to happen. Things begin to happen on a kind of a miraculous basis where you're like, oh, wow, that's almost like a miracle that just happened to me. I mean, I bear witness to that in my own life, where I've seen things happen that I can't fully explain in the physical dimension. But when I align myself with purpose, with meaning, with why I'm here, with my truth, a lot of things changed for me. Even sitting here doing this idea of a man, as I begin to realize, this is more to me than just something I'm doing for the sake of it. This is something I'm passionate about. This is something that comes from the depth of my soul. This is something that I really want to put out into the world. This is a piece of the puzzle that I feel is my piece to contribute. So therefore, as I do this, I see the universe begin to open up little doors and windows of opportunity, little ways in which this begins to make more sense in my own life. And I'm hoping that in your life, you'll find that for yourself, whatever that is, whatever your truth is, whatever is real on your journey. And as a result of even the conversation we've had today, you'll find a way to spend your time, your energy, and your money investing in yourself and in your dream, because, bro, you are worth it. So this is all about your idea of a man. I'm so glad you've joined me for another podcast here at The Idea of a Man. We've talked for around about 40 minutes. We've got another powerful podcast coming up where we're going to be talking about recreation and how we, after we've been out in the field, we've done all the work we've got to do to be all the things we've got to be. How do we recreate ourselves so that we can get back onto the playing field, recharged, rejuvenated, and ready to do all the things we've got to do to live out our dreams. Have an amazing rest of the week, rest of the day, rest of whatever it is that's happening in your life. And I hope to see you again next time as we talk about recreation and the remaining stages in the 12 chambers of The Idea of a Man. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.